Why take chances on just any built-in vacuum system? Emdy, a leader in built-in vacuum systems, has just the right unit for you. And that's money in the bank for you and your home. Emdy, better built, better backed to serve you.
Well, you're still in a fog about installing a built-in vacuum system in your own home? Well, we can help. Emdy Manufacturing has put together this film especially for you. Well, come with me out of the fog.
Installing a built-in vacuum system in your new or existing home is much easier than you may have imagined. By carefully following the instructions in this video presentation, you too can successfully install an Emdy built-in vacuum system in your own home in less than a day.
Planning. Yes, planning is the most important phase of any installation. Now there are three key areas we must consider. We must first determine the location of the power unit, then the location of the inlet valves, and then finally the location of the vacuum lines themselves. This information applies to both existing and new construction homes. And remember, local building codes should be complied with. Now the first question, where do we put the vacuum unit? Personally, I prefer mine right in the center of the living room. Of course, most people prefer them in the garage because it's the quietest and most accessible spot. And the utility valve can be used for vacuuming out the garage. If the power unit cannot be put in the garage, especially if you do not even have a garage, then a closet, utility room, or basement would be just peachy. Once you have determined the location of the power unit, make certain you have electrical power within 5 feet of the power unit. The amount of amperage and voltage required for each Emdy model is marked on a red label on the lower right-hand side of the power unit. Preferably, the power unit should be on a separate circuit. Unlike other units, Emdy does not require venting to the outside of the house. If you should put the unit in a closet or other confined space, just make sure you have adequate ventilation. Something as simple as slats in the door. Now we are going to decide where to install the vacuum inlets. Finding good locations will make vacuuming more efficient and easier. The ideal location for a vacuum inlet is in the hallway. This will allow several rooms to be serviced from one inlet, and rarely will there be furniture in the way. Another good place for an inlet is near a doorway, but watch that swing. It should not be placed behind a door because that door may need to be opened to vacuum inside that adjoining area. It might be another room or closet or whatever. Also, avoid placing an inlet in the middle of a wall or anywhere else that furniture or cabinetry might pose a problem. Now that you have decided a few possible inlet locations, cut yourself off a 30-foot piece of cord. This will substitute for our hose. Fasten one end of the cord to the baseboard below one of your choice locations. Pretend the cord is the vacuum hose. See if it will reach the furthest corner of the area to be vacuumed. Where's my chainsaw when I need it? Make sure you can reach all areas of the house, even corners and ceilings. For vacuuming stairways, an inlet at the bottom of the stairway is preferable. But if you don't have a stairway, well, never mind. It's easy so far, right? Now that you've determined the location of your power unit and the inlet valves, the next step is to determine the location of the vacuum lines themselves. When planning this part, remember the straighter the better. We want the vacuum tubing to make the straightest possible route from inlet valve to the power unit. It does not matter whether you take these lines through the attic or under the house, the principles remain the same. When making turns in a vacuum line, the larger radius turn, the better. When making a 90-degree turn, 2 45-degree L's is the best. Or a sweep 90L like here. And whenever possible, avoid a tight 90L like this. When branching into your main line, use a sweep 90T and make certain the sweep is toward the power unit.
To help illustrate the actual installation of an Emdy built-in vacuum system, we have constructed this set. While it may not cover every aspect of construction, it will give you the basic information needed to install your system in either a new or existing home. First, we will deal with the new construction.
Now that we've determined the location of the inlets, we need to make holes for the pipe. Here's one way. But it sure takes a long time.
Professor! Professor!
What?
I'm sorry, Professor, but we'll do the installation, if you don't mind.
Oh, shucks, you never let me do anything.
The ideal time for installing your system is after all the plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical lines have been installed and just prior to insulating. However, before you begin your installation, check to be certain you have the proper fittings and a sufficient amount of each, as well as vacuum tubing. Your local Emdy dealer will gladly assist you in determining and explaining your material needs. Begin your installation at the vacuum inlet furthest away from the power unit location. Vacuum inlets should be mounted the same height as the electrical outlets to conform to your home's decor. Mark the center height on the stud and nail your mounting plate to the stud. When locating a vacuum inlet near a doorway, be certain of the direction the door opens to avoid having the door interfering with your vacuuming. Also check for obstacles in the wall, such as light switches, that you may have to route the pipe around. You can bypass an obstacle in a wall with a short 90L, a section of pipe, and a 45L. Insert the 90 short L into the back of the mounting plate and angle the pipe until the 45L is vertically in line with the studs. Measure from the stud to the center of the 45L. Mark that distance on the fire block and top plate. This mark will be your center point for drilling the holes for the vacuum tubing. Whenever drilling a fire block, always try to drill about 6 inches from the end to avoid hitting nails or splitting the fire block. The fire block should always be drilled instead of removing it. Next, drill the top plate, but before you drill, carefully inspect for any nails, wiring, plumbing, or any other object that might be in the way. The preferred size hole to drill is 2 9/16 inch. A right-angle drill will have sufficient power to drill a hole that size. Both the drill and drill bit can be rented from your local tool rental firm. When drilling overhead, it is always advisable to wear safety goggles. Once you have drilled all your holes, you are ready to begin to piece your system together. Next, measure through the hole in the top plate down to the fitting the vacuum tubing will be going into. Be certain to allow for the height of the ceiling joist or any other object the vacuum tubing may have to go over. The vacuum tubing can easily be cut with a hacksaw. Make your cut as straight as possible. Remove the burrs on the cut edge with a pocket knife. Insert the cut vacuum tubing through the top plate and down through the fire block into the vacuum fitting. Up to this point, none of the pipe or fittings should have been glued. Place a 90 sweep L at the top of the vacuum tubing going into the attic. The 90 sweep L should be at a 90-degree right angle to the main vacuum line. To branch into the main line, use a 90 sweep T, making certain the sweep T is towards the power unit. Once you have properly pieced a section together this far, you can now go back and glue it together. Using PVC cement, apply a generous portion only to the outside end of the vacuum tubing. Slightly twist the tubing as you insert it into the fitting to ensure proper bonding.
It's easy so far, right?
Once you have routed the vacuum lines to the power unit location, you will need to penetrate the wall where the unit will mount. Route the pipe down the wall to 48 inches above the floor. At this point, the wall should be penetrated with steel tubing. Glue a 6-inch section of steel tubing into a 45L and then glue the 45L to the vacuum tubing in the wall, making certain the steel tubing stays in a straight line with the other tubing. Next, you will need to install the 2-conductor low voltage wire. Like the vacuum lines, you can run one main low voltage line and branch off to each vacuum inlet. The wire should be run through the same holes as the vacuum tubing.
Run about 12 inches of low voltage wire through the bottom hole in the mounting plate. Secure the wire to the vacuum tubing with plastic wire ties or electrical tape. Insert the loose end of the wire through the front opening of the mounting plate, and to assure that the correct size hole for the vacuum inlet is left in the drywall, you will need to install a plaster guard.
Run the low voltage leads next to the vacuum tubing to where the vacuum lines intersect. Tie the loose wire ends together in a knot. This will prevent the leads from being pulled apart. Trim the loose ends even. Next, separate the wire leads and trim the insulation back on each lead about 1/2 inch. There will be one silver and one copper wire lead from each vacuum inlet. Join all the loose silver leads together with a wire nut and all the copper leads together. It is extremely important that the silver and copper leads are kept separate. Finally, secure the connected wires to the vacuum tubing with a wire tie. Where the unit is to be mounted, you should leave approximately 4 feet of extra wire. Secure the wire to the vacuum tubing with wire ties and insert the loose end into the steel tubing. Cover the end with a pipe cap to protect the wire and inside of the tubing. The final step of your installation is to nail safety plates on both sides of any top or bottom plates you drilled to route the vacuum tubing through. This will prevent anyone from driving a nail into the tubing.
This first part of your installation is now completed. However, it is advisable to carefully re-inspect your installation to make certain that all the vacuum lines and low voltage lines are connected and that all the 90 sweep T's are installed properly.
After your home interior is finished, you will need to complete the final stage of your installation. First, remove the plaster guard and pull out the loose wire. Separate the wire leads and strip the insulation back about 3/4 of an inch. Connect one wire lead to one of the contact terminals on the vacuum inlet and the other wire lead to the other contact terminal. Insert the vacuum inlet into the opening and secure it with the provided screws. Repeat this process at all of the other vacuum inlet locations. The power unit requires 2 studs to be mounted on. Locate those studs and measure up 35 inches from the floor. Using that mark, align the top end of the hanging bracket on that mark and secure it to the wall either with screws or nails. Make certain it is securely anchored to a stud on both ends. Remove the pipe cap and pull out the wire. Next, hang the power unit on the mounting bracket. Using a Sweep 90L, a short piece of pipe, and a coupling, connect the power unit to the steel tubing. Inside the unit, you will find a red pipe cap. Use it to seal the unused intake neck. Route the low voltage lead to the lower right-hand side of the power unit. You will see 2 pairs of wires connected by wire nuts. Remove one wire nut and connect one of the low voltage leads. Connect the other low voltage lead to the other pair of wires. The unit is now ready to be plugged in and tested. To manually test the power unit, use the toggle switch. This switch should always be down in the off position, except for vacuuming directly from the power unit.
What next? What if your house is already built? Well, installing a built-in vacuum in an existing home is very similar to that of a home under construction, with the exception of how the vacuum inlets are installed. There are three ways to install the system. If your home is on a raised foundation, you can install the vacuum inlets directly in the floor, providing, of course, you have access to that area. Or you could install the vacuum inlets in the wall by routing your vacuum tubing inside the finish wall. Or you could install the vacuum inlets in the wall by routing the vacuum tubing through the wall into a closet, pantry, or some other concealed space where the vacuum tubing would then be routed down under the floor or up into the attic. The last method is the safest and will prevent you from damaging any plumbing or electrical that may be in the wall.
Professor?
What do you want?
We could use your help now.
Oh, I'll go get my saw.
No, we won't need the saw.
Once you have selected the concealed area to route your pipe, you can now begin your installation.
First thing you must do is carefully remove everything from the working area. Cute, but useless.
You will need to drill a small probe hole in the ceiling where you intend to route the vacuum tubing. It should be at least 1 1/2 inch from the edge of the walls. A straight piece of wire from a coat hanger makes an excellent probe bit. Using another piece of wire coat hanger, insert it through the hole and leave it. Do this in all the areas you intend to route your vacuum lines. Once all your probe holes have been drilled, go up into the attic and locate all the probe wires. Make certain there is no wood or other obstructions within 1 1/2 inch of the probe wire. If there are any obstructions, note them and drill a new probe hole that will give you the proper surrounding clearance. Assuming all the probe holes are now usable, measure from the corner of the wall to the pilot hole. Next, mark the wall at the center height you want to install the Drill a probe hole through the back side of the wall only. Angle the probe up, down, and sideways to locate any obstructions within 1 1/2 inches of the hole. If you now have at least 1 1/2 inch of surrounding clearance, you can drill a 2 1/4 inch hole using the probe hole as a center point. Using your finger, feel inside the wall to make certain there are no obstructions and that the outer edge of the hole is at least 3/4 of an inch away from the stud. Now drill a probe hole through the outer wall in the center of the 2 1/4 inch hole. It should be on center with your electrical outlets. Visually inspect to see that the probe hole is centered in the hole.
Well, how's it going so far? If you've made any mistakes up to now, they can be easily corrected and will not be noticeable. Let's keep going.
Measure from the corner to the center of the 2 1/4 inch hole. Mark that distance on any shelves that may be in the way. Using your mark as a center point, drill a 2 1/4 inch hole in the shelf. Remove the wire probe in the ceiling and drill a 2 1/4 inch hole using the probe as a center point. This now completes all the drilling inside the concealed area. Now drill a 2 1/4 inch hole on the front side of the wall where the vacuum inlet will be mounted. Use the probe hole you previously drilled from the other side. From the bottom of the hole, measure down 1/2 inch. Cut down both sides to the mark and then across. Now from the center, mark down 3/4 inch and cut a V slot. Insert the low voltage wire through the hole on the back side of the wall and out the front side. Insert the low voltage wire through the bottom hole in the mounting bracket for existing construction. Separate the 2 wire leads and strip the insulation back 1/2 inch. Twist the stranded ends together and attach 1 wire lead to each terminal on the vacuum inlet. Now insert the mounting bracket inside the wall. Don't worry if it falls, the low voltage wire is holding it. To enable you to assemble the vacuum inlet to the mounting bracket inside the wall, Emdy has designed this simple tool. Insert the rod part of the tool through the back hole and through the mounting plate and finally out the front. Pull the rod until the end is securely inside the mounting bracket. You can now control where that plate is in the wall. Stuff the extra wire inside the wall while sliding the rod through the vacuum inlet. Align the vacuum inlet with the mounting bracket and push the inlet into the mounting bracket while holding it secure by the rod. Next, insert the bottom vacuum inlet screw into the bottom screw hole of the mounting plate and tighten. Now do the same with the top screw. Check to see that the vacuum inlet is straight on the wall. If it isn't, loosen the screws and straighten it. You are now finished with the special tool and can push it out. Cut enough low voltage wire off to run up into the attic and over to your first junction. Next, insert a 3-inch piece of tubing with a 90 sweep L into a mounting bracket. The 90 sweep L should be pointed straight up toward the ceiling. Now insert at least 6 inches of extra wire back inside the wall so that the vacuum inlet can be removed if needed. Measure from the ceiling hole down to the vacuum fitting. Allow for any ceiling joists or other objects in the attic that the vacuum tubing may have to go over. After you have cut the vacuum tubing to the proper length, insert it through the holes and then into the vacuum fitting. At this point, none of the pipe and fittings have been glued. If everything has fit together right, you can disassemble this section and glue it. After gluing this section together, secure the low voltage wire to the vacuum tubing with plastic wire ties. Rotate the wire to the back side of the tubing to conceal it and to protect it from possible damage. Remember to leave at least 6 inches inside the wall. Now go up into the attic and connect all the vacuum lines and low voltage wire leads. Remember to route your vacuum lines as straight as possible back towards the power unit and to keep the 90 sweep tees flowing toward the power unit.
Route the vacuum tubing and low voltage lines on the outside of the wall where you have mounted the power unit. The power unit is mounted the same way as previously shown, and the low voltage wire is connected to the power unit the same way. Then plug the power unit in. Your system is now complete and ready to use.
Well, I hope we've cleared the fog. You can see how anyone can install this system. Well, almost anyone. If you need further assistance, please call your nearest Emdy dealer, or feel free to call me. I'd be glad to help.